about peptides is that just like we have small molecules, which are drugs that are very small, taken in a pill, and have a wide-ranging effect throughout the body, peptides are derived from little pieces of amino acids, which think of them as the Legos that make up the human body, the Legos that make up proteins. These are fragments of proteins that are designed to specifically target certain receptors and affect cells in a very targeted fashion. Or a best way to think about it is a very specific targeted key to unlock a very specific lock. So instead of a small molecule that may have a wide-ranging effect throughout the body, peptides are much, much more focused.
So you've got different types of Lego cubes here. Would they be different types of peptides, or are they different types of...
If you've got a hammer, right, which is what a lot of small molecules are, like you can do a lot with that, right? Like you could hammer in a nail. But if you try to use that hammer when you're trying to put in a screw or you're trying to put together, a table that you got from IKEA, it may not always end the way that you want to. Mm-hmm. And that's the problem that we have with a lot of small molecules. It's not that they don't do what we want them to. They do a lot of other things while they're at that job that can have significant negative side effects, which is why a lot of these small molecules actually don't make it all the way through the FDA approval process, because we find something, it does what we want to do, but it has significant safety concerns down the line, right? Now, what we see with peptides, for example, I've got in my hand right now a little vial labeled, BPC 157. This is probably one of the most popular peptides that we're talking about right now, because BPC 157 is a synthetic version of a naturally found states. It was called Myriad Genetics case. This was the company that actually patented the BRCA1 and BRCA2 genes. They discovered the genes that cause breast cancer, all right? This was mind-blowing. They identified the specific genes that would predispose patients to developing both breast, ovarian, and since we've learned, also prostate cancer. It was a fantastic discovery, but they patented it. And they said, we now own this intellectual property. And then everyone else said, no, that's the human body. You can't patent that. And the Supreme Court actually sided with that argument, saying that if something is natural, it's found within us, okay? I can't patent, your muscle cells, right? Which is a wonderful thing. But the unintentional byproduct of that is all of a sudden, pharma had no incentive whatsoever to pursue really promising compounds that they could not monetize. So in the 1800s or early 1900s, if you ever needed a medication, you go see the pharmacist who had a shop down the road, and he would actually make your medication in front of you. And he would do that custom for every single patient that came by, all right? And it was only since the advent of modern factories that we had the modern pharmaceutical industry come about. But the truth is that, again, that's kind of paint by numbers. You're creating this one pill, and, it always seemed kind of crazy that the adult dose is one standardized dose for all adults. Yeah. Like if you look at what your body composition is versus some of my patients, why is the dose in your blood pressure medicine the exact same? Like that doesn't seem to be quite right, but it is what it is. So when patients fall outside of that and they need custom medication, we still have those people who make custom formulations of medications. But instead of it being just your local pharmacist who's using a mortar and pestle and is creating something in his back office, these are now large, sophisticated industrial operations that can make custom formulations for patients, prescribe them to patients. I prescribe them to patients, all right, from 2014 onward. But then in 2023, the FDA at that time switched all of those peptides, 19 of them that were popular, to category 2, and then they were banned. Overnight, we got notifications in our email inboxes from our compounding pharmacy partners saying, hey, we can't make this anymore. We're sorry.
So I've got two questions there.
Yes.
The first is, when you were prescribing these peptides to your patient,
yes,
were you seeing incredible results?
Very much so. Very much. Again, you have to use the right key for the right lock. Okay. But I think a really good example. All right. So there is a compound that is not technically a peptide. It is a small molecule, but it was lumped in with all of these and was the victim to the same process. Form of GLP-1 drugs like semaglutide and tirzepatide. And I just saw a patient last week who increased his sperm count 10 times over and is now in a normal range because he's lost 100 pounds due to using tirzepatide, exercising, and improving his diet. And he has totally changed his life.
And that started with a peptide?
It started with a peptide.
So we've got lots of peptides on the table in front of
Yes.
you. We will go into them individually, but just can you give me a high-level view of the types of areas in our health and life that these peptides can help with? So we've talked there about infertility.
Correct.
As a downstream consequence of the weight loss and fixing the metabolic health. What other parts of the body do peptides touch?
The best way to think about it is like this. So peptides are almost like an app on your phone. So imagine before we had apps. Like I'm old enough to remember trying to log on. The gray market stepped in. And so these are companies that will sell peptides that have on the label for research use only. All right. And the idea is that that takes them out of the FDA's jurisdiction because they're not selling it for people to inject into themselves out of the FDA's hands. I'm just creating a vial of this magical juice that you can use for your rat, okay? That's the idea. We all know that's not what's really happening. But because there isn't any quality control, it's kind of like getting gas station sushi. Like, yeah, you can do it, but you don't really know if it's sushi and it may not end very well for you. Yeah. And so, again, not saying that there aren't some people who have gotten good results with research use only peptides, but again, it's not standardized, which is why I think moving this back into the 503A compounding world is the best thing for everyone.
Which is the legal framework.
Correct.
Okay, so how does one take a
of potential conspirators? And Caesar says, I've had it. Anybody bringing me more talk about an assassination plot is going to face consequences. He's like, you're going to get fired if I hear another about you bringing me an assassination plot. He doesn't want to hear it. And I think that's because he didn't want to rule over a subjugated, cowed populace. He wanted to rule over free Romans. And he didn't want a police state, cases to hear and petitions and laws needing passing. And he's also preparing for this great expedition to Parthia. He's going to avenge Crassus. Crassus was killed by the Parthians. They captured Roman eagles about 10 years earlier. So he's just trying to get through the next 3 days to get out of town and go back to, Caesar was good at politics, but I think
better at war.
I think he's better at war.
Yeah.
Or he's equally as good at war, and it's probably a happier place for him.
Even in BC times.
Like formal dinner every night. There's 9 seats at a typical Roman feast. You circle around on couches around a central table, and everybody kind of lies down. It's weird, but that's how they did it. And
horrible for the digestion.
It's horrible for the digestion, but one advantage is everybody has to have the same conversation because you're all pointed toward the center of the circle.
Yeah, as opposed to an elongated table
so
where this group over there is speaking like that, and this group.
Yeah.
That's interesting. I remember, who is it that suggested that the sign, because people aren't just pissed all the time.
Right.
They're just not drunk as much.
Yeah.
They're stimulated and they're going and getting stuff done. Anyway, I think it's Aristotle that had this issue. And his problem was, I want to go to dinner and have all of these interesting conversations, but everybody drinks their wine so fast that the conversation degenerates into sort of nothingness. So his suggestion was to his host to make the cups smaller. He says people will drink the same number, but they'll not realize that they're having less. And it's supposed to be, I think it's like an Aristotelian cup. Jared, do a ChatGPT. Below the mark line, the cup works normally. If you pour above the line, the siphon activates and the entire cup drains out through the bottom of the stem. For someone who tries to take more than their fair share, they end up with nothing. Legend says Pythagoras used it to teach moderation and fairness among workers or students, and the lesson is greed causes you to lose everything. Isn't that fucking cool?
So Greek.
Isn't that sick?
Moderation.
Yep.
Wise man, Pythagoras. Well, it's funny because, and Plato's Symposium that they decide to pour the wine, they pour water in the wine often for moderation so that for a long time having philosophical conversations. And it was this kind of conversation that was happening Caesar's last night. So Caesar is at the house of Lepidus, and he invites a number of people to be among the 9. Lepidus is a good trusted friend of his, and one of them is Decimus Brutus. This is not the Brutus that appears in Shakespeare's play Julius Caesar, and you too, Brutus. It's a different Brutus, but actually was a Brutus that was closer to Caesar in point of fact, historically, funny enough.
So does Shakespeare get that confused?
Well,
and
in fact, Decimus Brutus was in his will as a second. Decimus is one of the men who stabbed him the very next day. He's sitting there with him at dinner the night before. And they're sitting there having their conversation, as one does. As you know, a lot of final night scenes of great Romans and great Greeks are like these like philosophical conversations. And I think that's because they had them a lot, actually. It's very normal. The way you do that in Latin, the custom is you write vale, farewell. So all through the night, he's writing farewell, farewell, farewell on these letters.
And that's what you would have done typically?
That's what you would have done to say goodbye. But I mean, the fact that he's like filling out letters during dinner, I mean, this guy has got a shit ton of work to do.
Yep.
And he's just trying to get, it's brainless. He's just kind of, whatever. Yes. And go on, Cassius. Yes. And I find that striking. But at some point, that Cyrus made all these arrangements before his death that he wanted to be buried in this way, and this should happen, and so forth after he was gone. And of course, Caesar had read this book, Xenophon's Cyropaedia, and Caesar's turn comes to him and he says, "That sounds horrible. I don't want a long, slow death. The best kind of death is one that comes sudden, swift, and unexpected." You know, what is Decimus thinking at that moment? But that's well attested that that's what the conversation was about at some point that night.
Prophetic.
Yeah, man. She gets him up in the middle of the night. That like wind blows open the shutters, and he has to get up and shut them and calm down Calpurnia. And she had this dream that she was like holding the bloody Caesar, like looking at their house as it's like burning and collapsing. And there's all these birds are acting weird. So the story goes. I mean, a lot of these omens typically happen around great events in the ancient sources, but who knows? I mean, the murder of a guy like Julius Caesar really is a kind of like